Hey everyone, for today's video we're going to be doing a first look at the brand new Fuji X-E4. Fuji sent us out this camera a couple weeks ago, so the specs we have on this are very minimal. We're going to be talking about the experience and then briefly go over the specs. When Fuji sent us over the kit, they sent it with the thumb rest and also with the grip, and I just want to tell you, first user experience, just holding it and putting that together, it feels great in my hand. The Fuji X-E4 did feel a little bit smaller than usual, but once you add that on there, it makes the shooting experience a lot more comfortable, and I would recommend picking these accessories up if you're gonna get it with the camera. This camera is a 26.1 megapixel camera. It has a back illuminated CMOS X-Trans 4 sensor, so you're getting the brand new sensor that you see in your X-T4 series and your X Pro 3, so that's a huge plus. Autofocusing system, it does give us face tracking as well as eye detection. Fuji is claiming that this autofocus works at -6 EV. Now we're just gonna have to take Fuji's word for it because what we're testing today, it is bright outside, so unfortunately we're not gonna be able to see if their claims are true. Let's jump into some of the video specs now. This camera is capable to shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second. We can shoot full HD up to 240 frames per second. If you have plenty of light and you actually set up your shot, I've seen some of my coworkers in store use this on other Fuji models that can do this, and it looks phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit more about the 4K capabilities. So this camera is going to shoot 420 8-bit internally, and via the HDMI, if you output it to an external recorder, you can shoot 422 10-bit. Now, that is a great feature to have, but with the X-E4 and the people who are going to be looking to pick up this camera, I don't see people spending the extra money to be able to just shoot in 10-bit when a lot of cameras can shoot internally for somewhere around that same pricing. So thanks Fuji, but I don't think we're going to use that too much. So that's going to cover the photo and the video specs of what we currently have. Now we're going to talk about some of the external features that the X-E4 has to offer. So on the back, the first thing I notice is we lost our D-pad. We've seen this on other previous Fuji models. We do have our thumb dial pad, I guess you could say, our analog stick. I do like the left, down, up, right, and the center button because those actually function as other buttons, quick menu, and you can actually select that. On this thumb grip, I don't want to get too far into it, but sometimes I see myself going to the next page or clicking something a little too fast. So the best way to use this camera, I would recommend using the top dial for your shutter. On the lens, I would use it for your aperture, and then on the front dial, what I would use that for is program it to your ISO, so that way you can have all three if you're shooting in manual. On the side, we are going to have a shutter release cable. We're going to have a USB-C port, and then we also are going to get a micro HDMI port. Now there is no headphone jack, but Fuji has supplied a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter, so you can plug headphones up into this. The Fuji X-E4 uses the NPW126S battery, so if you already are shooting with Fuji, more than likely you already own some of these batteries, unless you're shooting with the Fuji X-T4. That's going to be a completely different battery, unfortunately. As for media on the X-E4, we get one single card slot that is also right next to the battery, and that is going to take SD cards. Now, like I mentioned previously on the start of this video, Fuji did send it over with the grip and the thumb rest, I guess. The thumb rest feels phenomenal, but also another feature that you have on this Fuji grip is this is an Arca Swiss compatible plate. So this is really nice because a lot of photographers out there are using ball heads. A lot of them are going to use Arca Swiss style heads on the top. So you just plug that in, it's going to clamp on there, and then I'm ready to go and start shooting. And speaking of shooting, today we're with Alexis here in downtown. The vibe we're going for today is a little bit street, so I picked the 23 f2. You can also go with the 1.4s, but for the size of this camera, I think that the f2s are going to be the way to go when you're shooting with these. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so we just got finished shooting with the X-E4 downtown. Now it's time for, of course, the final thoughts. So overall, my experience shooting with this, I was very pleased with it. There were some minor things that the camera had that I wasn't a huge fan of, and I'll talk about those here in a second, but I do want to start off with the positive. So first I want to mention is the size of it. Now, it's very small, it's compact, it's really easy to carry around with you, but I am going to say get the thumb grip and get the thumb rest, or sorry, not the thumb grip or the thumb rest, get the grip on it and then get the thumb rest on the top. It doesn't add very much weight to it, and honestly it made the shooting experience very pleasable. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Fuji did claim that you can shoot this at -6 EV with the autofocus still working. I wasn't able to get it that dark, but there was a situation we were under the bridge and we were shooting video. It was fairly underexposed and the tracking still worked no issue. Now, where I did see issues was when we were overexposed. Even by just one stop, it did have an issue trying to focus properly. So that is one issue that I saw with the autofocusing system. So low light, no problem. A little bit overexposed, you are gonna see a little bit of hiccups with the autofocusing system. Now, as we're out here shooting these videos, I kind of drew a blank, and when we were trying to shoot the video, I was pressing the shutter button and nothing was happening. So I dove all through the menus, nothing was happening again. And then finally I realized that you have to go to your drive mode again and to change that to video. Now, I should have known that, that's a huge thing, but I would have liked to see a separate button, or just, if it knows I'm trying to shoot video, just a quick switch for me to be able to change that back and forth really easily. But like I said, if you're already shooting Fuji, this is something you probably already know. Just slipped my mind, but one thing I did notice that, kind of set us back a minute or two. Not a huge deal though. One thing that I did not mention previously is the IBIS. So this camera does not offer any IBIS. You are gonna have to rely solely on the lenses. Now, if you're doing photography, you can always, up your shutter speed, and that's gonna help out a little. But if you're trying to use this for photo and video, you are gonna see a little bit of difference, especially when trying to handheld do back walking tracking shots like you saw previously. Speaking of those tracking shots, so 24 frames per second, we showed you the 4K, and we also showed you 1080 and 60 frames per second. But one thing that I do wanna note that I absolutely love in the Fuji cameras is the 240 frames per second in full HD. If you compose your shot well, just that slowed down movement just looked gorgeous, and even with this camera I thought it looked phenomenal, so I was overall pleased with that feature as well. Another thing that I do briefly want to touch on is we don't get the back dial. Now, that didn't hinder my shooting experience very much. Your ISO, you actually have the button right there that you can click and access it very easily with your D-pad. And then another thing I do want to talk about is we don't have a flip around screen. We do have we don't have a fully articulating screen, but we do have one that's going to tilt up and down. So that's going to help with shooting low angle stuff or trying to cut out any reflections. Last thing that I do want to touch on that I wished was a little bit more improved was the eyepiece. Now, this sort of reminds me of your X Pro 3, but a little bit smaller. So it was really bright outside, and when I was backlit shooting with a Lexus, a lot of that sun was hitting me and a lot of that light was getting in. So the resolution wasn't the greatest, but also it didn't block enough light out for my personal taste, but overall it is still usable. So now let's talk about prices and availability. So the price for the X-E4 body only is going to set you back $849.95 US at the time of this video. They are also selling it with a kit with the 27 f2.8. We did a video previously for that. If you haven't checked it out, I'm going to put it up top right above me. Make sure you check it out, guys. That kit paired with the 27 2.8 is going to set you back $1049.95 US at the time of this video. And availability, this is going to be available on March 11th. So check the links down below and make sure to support Precision Camera and Video with your pre-order. That's going to bring us a wrap for this video. Overall, I really like this camera and I think a lot of people should be picking this up. So other than that, remember, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on our next video.